Thank you so much, Jennifer and Thierry and Sawako, and to everyone at International House and here at Asia Society Japan for inviting me to come speak. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and those of you online as well. I know that this is an extremely busy time in Japan, so thank you for your understanding. I actually, wanted to come earlier, but after the rescheduling of my initial trip, I couldn't leave because Meiji Modern was keeping me so busy. And we spent 3 weeks installing it at the Smart Museum, where they only have two technicians who build the exhibition, and one registrar, and then they also hired some other art handlers and who are usually artists. But we had this amazing team and put together the exhibition in Chicago. So now that it finally opened last Thursday, I'm free to take a few days off and come here. So thank you very much. And in fact, the International House of Japan, the architecture, Maya Kawakunio, I have taught this in class, but I've never stayed here until last night. And so it's very exciting for me to finally be here and give a talk here. So Meiji Modern was first conceived and organized by the Japanese Art Society of America, JASA, which used to be the Ukiyo-e Society of America. So they are a group of collectors, Japanese art enthusiasts, dealers, scholars, and curators who love Japanese art. And for their 25th anniversary, they did a exhibition of the arts of the Edo period, designed for pleasure, which featured many outstanding works from the private collections of JASA members. And that was at the Asia Society, where at the time it became the most attended exhibit of the Asia Society gallery on record. And it also had a shorter exhibition period because of the fragility of the works, and it still managed to bring in a lot of people. So building on that success, JASA, for their 50th anniversary, thought, well, we did the Edo period, so let's move on to the next period, the Meiji period. And so the exhibition in New York, having concluded, is now on view at the Smart Museum of Art of the University of Chicago, where it is actually the only venue that's free. So it's completely free. Everyone can come in as many times as they want. And my office is right across from the museum, so I plan to be there a lot, and welcome all of you. We are also having a symposium on May 3 and 4 at the International House of Chicago, which is an affiliate of it with the International House of Japan, and that's going to be an international symposium. And following that, it will move to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, which will be its largest venue with many exciting events. And that is where my co-curator, Bradley Bailey, is the curator of Asian art, the head curator of Asian art. So in conceiving this exhibition, of course, it was several years in the making, and we had the pandemic. We got many questions about, well, is Meiji art really modern? And so I said the idea here is not modernism, kind of form follows function, extreme simplification, but rather these other aspects of global interconnectedness, a consciousness of your time period in the present is different from the people in the past. And of course, all of the aspects of Meiji were not only bright and celebratory, right? So this is a time when Japan faced incredible political and economic challenges and pressures. And they responded to those pressures, making an army and a navy, acquiring overseas territories, and also undergoing societal changes that affected many aspects of life. And, of course, were not easy for people. And yet within that, we can't help but notice the incredible enthusiasm and energy for artists, among artists, because the Meiji period gave them access to so many new forms of visual art, visual information, and they were really inspired to kind of take these and make new things and kind of go in new territories. So this will to experiment with new mediums and to update existing. So if you've ever looked at Meiji kimonos, for example, Meiji Yuzen dyeing, you know that they came up with all these innovations compared to the Edo period. And so the same with everything. So you know, some of the ways that we try to express this modernness is, for example, in this print from the Lavenberg collection, a private collector on the west coast of U.S. All the works in this exhibition are from the U.S. Because JASA is the Japanese Art Society of America. So in a way, it also shows a view of Meiji Japanese art taken from things that were collected in the U.S. So we all know the Saigo statue in Ueno Park, and you know this is a woodblock print that shows the time that it was constructed. And this statue was very controversial, right? Because Saigo led a rebellion against the new Meiji government. And so in this, we can see kind of the ways that Meiji officials and ordinary people processed even the recent past. And you can see the little boy in the sailor uniform. You can see people wearing a mixture of Japanese and Western style clothing. We can also see modern media such as lithography, and of course this is a poster for the Mitsukoshi department store. This is by the wonderful Shinhanga artist Hashiguchi Goyo, and then prints by Kiyochika on the bottom, Ogata Gekko on the top, which are wood block, but they experiment with kind of techniques that we see in Western watercolor or lithography to create this very atmospheric kind of presentation. And these images, of course, relate to the Sino-Japanese War. We see the Empress, right, greeting the Emperor and the troops when they came back from Hiroshima, which is where they had set up camp to communicate about the war. And she's, you know, wearing this beautiful Western gown. So we wanted our exhibition to be accessible, approachable to everyone, you know, from specialists to the general public. And my co-curator, Bradley, who's done a lot of, you know, exhibitions of different types of Japanese art, said, well, this is the perfect exhibition for people who don't know about Japanese art, and also the perfect for people who think they know about Japanese art, because there's so many new and surprising things here. So by having a thematic lens, this allowed us to, be very flexible with our checklists and kind of grouping things, not in a strict chronological order, but by theme. So we have these 5 themes that you see here, and these are the same at all of our venues. You can see footage from the Asia Society. So our first section, Crafting a Modern State, sort of serves as an introduction to the Meiji period. So we have these glass slides that you can illuminate with a button of the Meiji Emperor and Empress, as well as a hand-colored lithograph of the couple, where, of course, he's shown in Western dress, she's shown in Japanese dress. So it's like they fused different images of the Emperor and Empress into one image and then disseminated this to the Japanese public. And then, of course, Goshin-e, right, showing how, this is a woodblock print from the Meiji period that is showing how the tradition of revering and displaying images of the Emperor and Empress was established in Meiji Japan as a sort of modern ritual. So, of course, these images of the Emperor and Empress were created based on the need to disseminate images of the new leader of Japan in order to make the appeal for Japan's sovereignty, right, on a world stage. In Japan, traditionally, the emperor was not depicted, right? It was beyond the clouds. But then in the world of 19th century monarchies, you needed state photographs, right, to exchange. The other aspect of kind of crafting a modern state literally concerns craft, handcraft. So here in the Asia Society, you can see an incredible cloisonné drum with a rooster on top, so that's a symbol of good governance. And this was displayed at the Vienna World's Fair of 1873. So we have many objects, it's now in the Metropolitan, we have many objects that were actually displayed at the World's Fairs, and through this extraordinary craftsmanship, Japan was able to present itself as an educated, updated, technologically astute nation, right? And also make the claim for sovereignty through actually these finely crafted objects. I just couldn't resist doing this installation shot. These are our art handlers, and they're surveying. We put 2 crystal balls. So actually, Meiji generated a lot of the world's crystal balls. They're, in the late 19th or early 20th century, the Victorians, they had seances and everything. But who knew that all these, quartz, natural polished crystal balls came from Japan? And so you get reflected upside down in a crystal ball, and when you put 2 crystal balls next to each other, you can actually look through them and you'll go upside down and right side up. So these images are from our next section, Navigating Changing Seas, and these crystal balls are now reinterpreted as artwork as the tide controlling jewel of traditional Japanese mythology. That this idea that what is it? Jingu, Kogo, and these early mythical generals defeated their enemies by using the tide controlling jewel so that they could win naval battles, either lower the tide or raise the tide. And so you can see these splashing waves that are done with hammered silver, pure silver, jungin, and then bronze rocks and a shakudo coated bronze dragon. So in this section, it's quite fun. We had all these images related to the ocean, including, from the black ships, right, that started the Meiji period to the Japanese Navy, right? So this idea of the seas are something that facilitates Japan's interaction with the world, but also, is this danger zone of sovereignty. This Taikon, Yokoyama Taikon painting, amazing kind of Whistler-esque painting, very abstract, was painted by him probably in Boston when he went with Ishida Shunso and Okakura Tenshin to New York and Boston to sell his work, because at that time Taikon was not yet famous, and many people in Japan did not really get his work because it was too modern, right? It was too new. And so he makes this kind of semi-abstract work, and it was a huge hit among the Bostonians. So this was treasured in a private collection where it wasn't even framed. It was just the loose silk that they said he painted it on his bed, kind of because he sold all the works he brought from Japan, so he actually brought more. And then, of course, another aspect of the seascape is new identities, kind of the bathing suit, new fashions, leisure, right? The reinterpretation of the seashore as this place of leisure. And that leads into our third section, which is fashioning the self. And so in this section, we were very proud to be able to include 3 oil paintings. So yoga, right, from Meiji onward, Japanese painting is separated into yoga and nihonga. But oil painting was extremely popular among artists and wealthy patrons, and there were some Meiji arts officials who thought that Japan should just abandon, or minimize ink painting and instead focus on mastering oil painting. And then, of course, there were other people like Okakura who felt that Japanese traditional painting needed to be preserved. But actually, in the United States and maybe in Europe too, there are very few Meiji yoga, very few Meiji oil paintings, because Western collectors didn't gravitate toward them, right? And museums, even today, are not active in acquiring oil paintings. So all 3 of these were from American private collections. I would love to see more American museums acquire oil paintings. This Mitsutani Kunishiro is from a private collection. It was originally discovered in Maine, possibly when he toured the country together with Yoshida Hiroshi in the late Meiji period. He probably brought it with him and sold it. And it's very close to another painting. This is a detail, but it's very close to another painting called Upstairs, which is in Tokyo National Museum and is a Juyo Bunkazai, so an important cultural property. So, it's really exciting to be able to find these works. Our 4th section is about history and myth. So, this is about modern Japan, but modern Japan also had to reorganize its tradition, right, and present its traditions in ways that bolstered narratives of Japan's national identity. But one thing that we did besides kind of history pictures, which have a pretty obvious allegory to the state, is we also had our kind of spooky corner where we had lots of ghost paintings and also Buddhist paintings, religious works, and the skeleton, the anatomical drawings of the skeleton became more available in Meiji Japan because in Edo they were proprietary knowledge of bone setters, and so they were kept secret. And it was only toward the later Edo period that the skeleton became published available knowledge. And so this touched off lots of skeleton art. We know that images of the occult were popular then as now. And this is an image from the Chicago, a part of the galleries in Chicago. Yesterday, I was down in Kyoto at the Kawashima Textile Museum to study this gigantic tapestry, 12 by 18 feet, that you see on the wall there beyond the blue and white vase, colossal vase. And this is an image of the Aoi Matsuri. And it's an incredible work that was gifted from the Meiji government to the U.S. Secretary of State at the time, who was an Indiana man. And so it ended up in the Indianapolis Museum of Art. It was too big to fit in the Asia Society New York, but we're proud to be able to include it in Chicago and Houston. And it's just magnificent. And actually yesterday I was there and they kindly unrolled for me the preparatory drawings, and the artists worked so hard on adjusting the composition. For example, they wanted the faces of these figures, even though it shows a traditional Japanese scene, the faces are very naturalistic, and kind of the movements, because the Kawashima, the head of the Kawashima textile company, asked somebody trained in oil painting, Tamura Soryu, if he could kind of adjust the originally Japanese style figures that the Nihonga artist Imao Keinen had drawn. And so because he was afraid that Japanese traditional Japanese figure drawing was not up to date, was not sophisticated as the Western style. And so like many Meiji works, this work freely combines Japanese and European and even Chinese. Like there's kind of Chinese ink painting on the hills and on the pine trees. So some people use the word hybrid, but I try to stay away from that word or influence, because influence kind of implies that the Meiji artists were just doing their thing and Western art kind of hit them. But it's not true at all. In fact, they were very self-conscious about which aspects of European or Japanese or Chinese art that they chose to include, and they created something new, just like all of us do. Whenever we create something, it's a kind of based on some things of the past and also adding some new things. And so we have that feature in Meiji art. This is another image of the galleries in Chicago, and this one, we also have a section in Chicago and Houston that was not able to fit in Asia Society New York, about the role of Chinese culture in Meiji art. So many people in Japan know that the Isshin Shishi, right, the founders of the Meiji Restoration, they studied the Confucian classics. They wrote, bold Chinese calligraphy and poetry, right, Chinese style calligraphy and poetry, and they loved, Chinese style painting. So over here, you can see a bit of a pair of screens by Noguchi Shohin, one of the leading female painters of the Meiji period. And this is treasured by the Art Institute of Chicago. It's actually double-sided, so I'm only showing you the first side. The other side is silver. It's a wonderful ink painting. And on this side, it shows Gishi, Wang Shizhi, the the great sage of calligraphy in China. And so this is, of course, the Lanting Pavilion. where they're floating the wine cups down the river and composing poetry and calligraphy. And it's all done in this very atmospheric style because Chinese Qing Dynasty art was also incorporating European elements like atmospheric perspective to make the art kind of more, have a sweeping vista. And so Japanese painters actually also learned some techniques of blending European and Japanese art from Chinese painting, or European and Asian art, you could say. It's interesting, even though this was painted by a woman, every single figure in here is a man, showing this historical event. So our final section of the exhibition is called Cultivating a Modern Aesthetic. And even though the exhibition doesn't proceed chronologically, we do have more kind of like Yokohama A early style works in the first section, and then in the last section we focus on the late Meiji, where in my opinion Japanese artists and crafts makers, right, these are cloisonne vases that are based on paintings by Watanabe Seitei, and you can see how how close they are. We have some Seitei paintings from the Coles collection now in Portland, and so in this period artists really focused on a subdued naturalism that blended elements of Art Nouveau, Art Deco, with Japanese traditional art. So instead of having these really over-the-top, extremely intricate works and heavy, like fully decorated works that we associate with the Victorian aesthetic, and maybe that has given Meiji art, a bad name, these works are deliberately very restrained, right? And they lead right into what we consider a wafu, like Japanese style art today. It's about restraint. It's about yohaku, leaving something blank, right? Not just filling up all the available space. In this picture, you can also see, I will call him my polar bear, that I found in the Art Institute of Chicago. It's embroidered. It is an embroidered polar bear, and the Ueno Zoo acquired its first pair of polar bears in 1902, and so that touched off a flurry of polar bear themed arts and crafts that I never knew about, and until I found this work, which I don't think has ever been exhibited. And so the Art Institute framed it for us, and it looks really great. It looks really three-dimensional. So yes, we're proud in this exhibition to have works of art that were bought in the Meiji period and have been in America ever since, as well as works that have never been exhibited before or haven't been much exhibited, even some works that were more recently acquired by American collectors and museums. At the Smart in Chicago, we are having many events, and as I mentioned, the museum is free. So this is footage from our first family day last Saturday, where students learned about tarashikomi. I was really amazed that our education person at the Smart knew about tarashikomi and got ink. And so when we entered the lobby of the museum here, you could smell the fragrance of the Japanese ink. And so students experimented with doing a tiger, just like the one that you can see on the wall here. This is also Chicago. So we'll end soon, but in the last few minutes, I just wanted to say that one question that I get is how does Meiji Modern relate to exhibits of earlier exhibits of Meiji art, and especially exhibits in Japan, right? So I will feature these are both done by my own friend and colleague, research collaborator, Tsunoda Takuro, who is a curator at the Kanagawa Prefectural Museum of Cultural History in Yokohama. And this is an exhibition that he did recently, last spring, on Meiji art. And this is an exhibition on lacquerware that he is about to present this coming April. So I recommend you take a look at the lacquerware exhibit. And so, I think there are many similar themes between the Japanese exhibition and our exhibition. We were really, I think scholars have told us that the U.S. is quite strong in craft objects. So, for example, like these musen shippo-yaki, the wireless cloisonne, where these cloisonne enamels are usually separated by copper or gold wires. But Namikawa Sosuke developed the technique of removing the wires or shrinking the wires to create these amazing effects of blending that look like ink or watercolor. And so, our exhibition also focuses on some things, on works that we have in the U.S. As well as for me this time, I really wanted to connect Meiji Modern. Bradley and I want to connect the Meiji period to the discourse of global modernity, right? That modern was not something that the West had a monopoly on, but was, that different versions of an unfolding of a modern aesthetic were happening in different countries all at the same time, and were indeed interconnected. So for me, that when the Meiji period started, Japanese artists who had never, of course, traveled abroad didn't know much about Western art, right? And so there were gaps in knowledge on both sides, right? That, for Van Gogh and Bracquemond and, all these people, the woodblock prints were so fresh and new and exciting because they'd never seen Japanese art before. And so we go from the early Meiji period, where these huge gaps in knowledge, until the late Meiji period. So I think we can say that the story of Meiji is the story of narrowing this artistic gap between East and West. So by the late Meiji, you can't just talk about Japanese art being influenced by Western art, but rather this is a conversation, right, that's happening in real time. And American artists are going to Japan, and European artists and Japanese artists are going to Europe and America. This is, kind of just a short introduction to the exhibition. And I thank those of you who have already supported the Asia Society. And here's some information on how you can continue to support us. This is, needless to say, a phenomenally expensive exhibition. And at every stage, I feared that it might not come to fruition. So I stand here with just already so much gratitude, and definitely, if you're inclined to help us, please let me know. So this ends my presentation. I'm happy to have questions.
Having seen the Asia Society Museum exhibit back in October, I think, and hearing more in-depth details about how you and Bradley had created this exhibit, it's quite fascinating. So I'm really happy to hear that. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to be asking a few questions, and I'll open up to the floor later, and we'll also be taking online questions. So for our online guests, please submit your questions through the Q&A box. Chelsea, for us Japanese, when we're schooled here in Japan, we don't really get to Meiji period often, unless you're cramming for entrance exams. So, from my perspective, it was fascinating to see the dynamic aspects of the Meiji period and its artworks, and the energy that the artists were providing to create these objects within the 50-year span. I was just remembering that my grandmother was born the last year of Meiji, so maybe she had caught some of that as well. In terms of the exhibit itself, can you tell us about some of the challenges that you've faced? You have over 175 objects?
Yeah, like over 70 lenders, both public and private. So there were so many challenges, and also COVID, right? We're supposed to travel around to look at art, and in both museums and private collectors. We have to arrange to visit them, but we couldn't visit them. So we thought, in this crucial phase when we are trying to organize the exhibition, how can we come up with a checklist, without being able to visit the work. So finally, we're able to kind of visit and travel with masks. And my own PhD student covered some places because I just couldn't couldn't travel in the short time after COVID to cram in all the visits. So that was very busy, but it was also extremely exciting. And we discovered some really interesting private collectors. So for example, like the Goyo, there's a collector, a private collector, Daryl Carl, who loves Hashiguchi Goyo and has works in every medium, including a very rare, you can see that nude painting of the woman in profile. That is a painting by Goyo, one of his very few oil paintings. So, and it's on the back, it says, "To my teacher, Asai Chu," who's a very famous yoga painter, pioneer of Meiji period. So, first of all, just determining the works was a challenge. And, we try with this thematic, we wanted to be able to juxtapose similar works of similar themes. And so we have a whole section with different skeletons. We have this, images where the craft objects are speaking with the paintings, having a conversation. And so that was very important to us, to choose individual objects that were extremely high quality, as well as thematically fit with our theme, and just exciting and interesting. The everyone loves the crystal balls, and so and of course all of these objects, if they have condition issues, like if anything is a little bit fragile, the museum is like, no, you can't borrow that. And so we encountered many things, but many challenges. But in the end, we're very proud that we were able to get a lot of spectacular objects.
In the installation at Asia Society in New York, as well as in Chicago, I see that some of the color themes are similar. How did you come to that? Like the wall colors, or how you're displaying? How did you come to that?
Yes, thank you. So in Japan, a lot of the museums have these for Nihonga or Japanese painting or crafts. They have these sliding cases. They open up, you just pop the works in and lock it up again. But in the US, because the galleries are suited for works, all types of works, like oil paintings that hang on walls, it turns out that these plexiglass cases are really expensive, which I never knew. And there's so many considerations, like how to hang works on the wall, like these works from Chicago, the paintings. Each one of those hanging scrolls has its own kind of plexiglass case that fits onto the wall, so that the work won't be damaged. And so we were dealing with these constraints, and then we try to pick wall colors that would make the work stand out. And also, here's Asia Society, and also to give viewers a consciousness that they are moving into a different section. So we alternated between like these really intense colors and then more light, delicate colors. In this section, we have some textiles, and so and then of course in the ocean section, we painted the walls a kind of marine, it's hard to see in this, but kind of a bluish gray, and which really highlighted the works and made them look nice. So myself, as primarily a professor rather than a curator, I didn't have a lot of experience with some of the mechanical aspects of making an exhibition and all the decisions that go into it. And now I just have such enormous respect, and it's also like really exciting to try to think about how to design the exhibition. So now I hope I can teach students too, my students, how to be curators. Yeah.
Chelsea, in terms of the education programs that you have at the Smart Museum, can you elaborate on some of the things that you're doing beyond the family programs?
Sure. So we have a variety for different audiences, because one of the amazing and kind of challenging things about the Smart is that we have the university audience, we have the local Hyde Park audience, the broader south side of Chicago, which has a lot of traditionally underserved communities very close by. And so and of course, just larger kind of arts, Chicago is pretty vibrant in terms of art scene. So we have a variety variety of events. So, including the family days, we have this series called Smart Salons, which are, going to be evening events in the gallery where I'm going to be in dialogue with like another different experts. So next week we're talking about Meiji architecture, and so we have Erez Golani Solomon, who is actually he is affiliate of Waseda University and an architectural studio and theory expert in Japanese architecture. And so we're going to go through and look at the works that show the built environment and talk about Meiji architecture. And then we're having a very large symposium, as I mentioned, which is going to include scholars from Japan, the US, and Great Britain on May 3 and 4. I think we also have like event about kimono and fashion in the Meiji period. So I think somebody is going to bring actual kimonos and demonstrate different considerations for wearing kimono. So we hope that there's going to be a variety of ways that different types of audiences can be invited in. Yeah.
I am Johnny with the Art Foundation in Tokyo.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. It was very, you put a lot of life into your talk, and I appreciate it very much. It's inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Just sort of a little bit separate from the subject, have you been to the new museum in the Meiji Jingu designed by Kengo Kuma?
No.
Oh. Because I went to, for me, I do strictly more avant-garde contemporary culture, and I'm not too much into historical, but I think it's the best curated historical museum I've ever seen. And the open spaces that allow this traditional idea in Japan where the house becomes one with nature, with the sliding open doors and stuff. So anytime, if you're free, I would love to invite you for lunch and show you the museum, or maybe you can go in if you don't have time, because it's really amazing. I want to get your opinion on the curation.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I'll make it a priority. Thank
Please.
you.
Thanks, Johnny. It's actually a really good museum. I've recently been there and heard a lecture there from the great-great-grandson of the Meiji Emperor.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm John Gray. Thanks for apologies for being a little bit late. But I'm just looking through the catalog and seeing some of these slides they're incredibly interesting works. Like they have such an edge and particularly departing from what was happening previously. To what extent, and I've read elsewhere that while Meiji, the Meiji art and Meiji trends were deeply embraced and incorporation of other techniques from other countries and other styles, to what extent, like in the Taisho and kind of in that really difficult year, was there any kind of rejection of that, or kind of a let's go back to like traditional Japanese techniques? In your studies, have you found any tension to that, or kind of more of a nostalgia? Because we see in the catalog and we see this depictions of Japanese people in Western wear and kind of the moga concept.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of rejection of that, or kind of a sense like, okay, we've kind of gone off kilt here, let's get back to basics? And then we see that sometimes in Japan now. It's like we've over incorporated, let's go back to, and in architecture I think there was some concerns that architects that built some of the governmental buildings, they needed to move back to more of a Japanese, and that might have been in connection with kind of the nationalist sentiment at the time. But we'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
That's such a great question. Thank you. I can answer in kind of several ways. First is that definitely in the late Meiji and Taisho, well, there are kind of two things. One is in history, we learned that in the mid-Meiji to late Meiji, like their Meiji 20s and 30s, there's kokusui shugi no jidai, right? And that there's supposedly a kind of backlash to the excessive westernization. And so actually, I always wondered about this because, in looking at art, it seems, artists are going to do their own thing. They're not going to, follow whatever the politicians or intellectual history are doing. So I think, kind of what changed is that artists felt more comfortable with Japanese tradition, with their own tradition, more proud of it. Whereas right, like with this tapestry, the idea that the Kawashima was telling the artist, no, you need to make the figures more Western so that Japan doesn't embarrass itself by having these non-anatomical type figures, right? And so in the late Meiji, I think artists feel more confident. But beyond that, it seems that the traditional Japanese arts like Nihonga and some crafts, they developed all these unwritten rules that I think were enforced by juries and also by art schools, right? For example, I was just at the Fukuda Museum in Kyoto, and they had a screen by somebody who studied with Takeuchi Seiho. Actually, I think Seiho's son-in-law. And then that screen showed what they identified as a middle to lower class family going out to do cherry blossom viewing. And in the explanatory text, it said that in Nihonga, and this work was from about 1903, it said that in Nihonga, there was a discouragement of depicting ordinary figures from contemporary life, right? Like you could have these incredibly polished beauties, right? But that you wouldn't show like an average family, with 3 generations and so forth. And so it was interesting to read because these rules aren't written down anywhere, but you can just feel it when you look at the art. When you look at Nihon, that one of the things that prompted me to write my dissertation on Nihonga was feeling that there were all these unwritten, kind of constraints on what it could be, and wondering about kind of how those developed. So it's interesting that certain art was made to play this traditional role, and they created rules that are not related only to style, but also to class, right? That, to create a certain polished, upper class, timeless image of Japan. So it's really fascinating. At the same time, I think one thing is that I noticed between today and now, like they said that in this period of backlash, that oil painters suffered because the government was no longer funding a lot of oil painters to say go abroad and so forth, that it was definitely like there's a difference between artistic trends versus like funding priorities, right? And we see this in the arts today in all countries, right? That artists are always that art needs funding to thrive, and so the decision of which art gets funded can play a huge role in what gets presented and what can flourish. So thanks.
Thank you, Takehito from Sophia University. My question is about navigating changing sea.
Yeah.
You showed us Yokoyama Taikan's painting.
Yes.
You mentioned that he and his colleagues visited New York City and then Boston. Did you observe any influences or inspiring happening to him after visiting United States, going back to Japan? For example, painting subject or techniques. Did you see any things he learned from his trip to the United States on his artworks?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that he became more confident. So with Taikan and Shunso in the their early periods, there was Morotai, right? The hazy style or misty, foggy style that we can see in this work. There's no lines. Whereas, of course, the Terasaki Kogyo Bijin is full of, wonderful outlines, right? And so this was controversial at the time, with some people saying line is the soul of Japanese art, but Taikan wanting to go in another direction and experiment with the techniques and materials. So I don't know about whether he learned specific techniques from his time in America. Maybe it was too short, but I feel like maybe he became more confident in the things that he did do. Another thing, maybe he learned that he got exposed to enthusiasm for ink painting. So in the Taisho period, he started experimenting with more like ink painting in addition to color painting. So thanks.
Yes, Matthew Thompson, Sophia University. You touched upon this topic already sort of indirectly in your talk, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you saw this exhibit sort of challenging kind of the view of Meiji art or Meiji culture that we typically have, that maybe students or people in the US typically have, and how you wanted to go beyond that.
That's a great question. I actually have a slide for that. So, this is kind of overview. There was a big exhibit of Meiji art in 1980. And then there was Halili Collection? Kalili Collection based in London has toured the US as well as Europe in the 90s and even more recently in Paris and so forth. And then this collection focused on art made for the international expositions and very, very intricate works that focus on technique. And then in these exhibitions, the word imperial appears as kind of like a selling point, like, but of course the idea of empire is nothing to celebrate. And so in our exhibition, we definitely wanted to celebrate Meiji art and celebrate the ingenuity and the kind of the Meiji and people who lived in the Meiji period. But we wanted to kind of point out that this is happening in a complex global geopolitics where there's another book called Negotiating with Imperialism, just that like Japan had to kind of negotiate its place because Japanese art was at first disparaged by Europeans and Americans who actually thought it was just like inferior to Western art, and so and that Japanese, society was less civilized, right? And so the Meiji artists were trying to prove a point when they made these really intricate works. But so I think we wanted to kind of give people a sense of the ups and downs of this period, but also we really wanted to just introduce people to really amazing artworks that can maybe change the image. One image that people had was that I got rid of the slide, but people said that in the past people said that Meiji art was a kind of awkward hybrid of Japanese and Western art, and so that maybe some works appear awkward, and Western viewers of an earlier age felt that Meiji art was not interesting because it was merely derivative of Western art, or that it was corrupted, right? That the pure Japanese art of earlier times got kind of corrupted by Western influence and became Meiji art, which is hard to look at. But of course, people adore Yoshitoshi, who actually combines European and Japanese style art and themes in all sorts of really interesting ways. And so our idea was that if we show people really dynamite works of art, they will also change their view of the Meiji period. So,
congratulations, and thank you so much for being with us. So you mentioned a few times that, like Yokoyama went to America and sold artworks, sold everything out. So I'm wondering what you could tell us about some of the art market of the time.
Yeah.
Japanese buyers, still in short supply, I think. Today, American buyers, what could you tell us about all that?
That's a great question. So, of course, the basic storyline is that the decline of shogunal and samurai patronage, all these artisans who had been retained by individual domains to make, sword fittings and shrines and lacquer trousseaux for, important people getting married and paintings, they all lost their jobs, right? They had been on a fixed salary in the feudal system to the lords and shogun, and they lost that. And so they were really, a lot of artists and craftspeople suffered and gathered in Yokohama, right? And so because the foreign market immediately opened up as something to replace, but then there was the issue of, well, what is it that foreigners want to buy? Because these guys, they used to work for their lord. They would not make anything without showing, 5 or as many underdrawings as it needed for the lord to say, change this, change that, or even designing a kimono, right? That the patron called all the shots, and then the craftsperson made what they wanted. So I think they initially approached, foreigners with the same idea, like, well, what do foreigners want? We'll make it, like, tell us, what do they want? And so in a lot of Meiji lacquerware, you can see Chinese style furniture, these zolgan, these kind of embedded lacquer, embedded mother of pearl and ivory, and kind of these encrusted style of artwork. It was something that foreigners were already buying in China. And so then these Japanese lacquer artists adjusted their output for that. And so over time, you had kind of new corporations or even old reborn corporations like Mitsui, right? If you go to the Mitsui Museum in Tokyo, you can see that they display with pride some of the Meiji and Taisho era paintings and craft objects that they patronized, and they're very proud of their legacy as a patron of Maruyama Okyo and of tea, and that they continued that patronage, kind of so merchant patronage, corporate patronage, and then Kawashima. That made the tapestries, they made these to decorate the Meiji Palace and also the Geihinkan, right, the Hall of State, and they're still doing it today, actually. And the seats of the Kabukiza they're fabric, they're brocade fabric, and so they try to find other, sources of patronage, the imperial household as well as corporations, and but definitely I think the fact that there are so many works that went abroad reflects the tight market for art in Japan. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kazuko Aso. I'm a member of the board of Tokyo University of Fine Arts, and we are now having a fantastic exhibition of Dai Yoshiwara Ten.
Oh yes, I'm going to see it tomorrow, I think.
Oh, I see. I would like to say that all these Japanese rich culture was developed very much during the Edo period, because we had no war during 260 years.
Yes.
And even like a place like Yoshiwara, red light sort of area, in this area, the culture was really rich. And the men, when they're just enjoying, but they served a lot of entertaining, dancing and flower arrangement and so on. So I really recommend all of you to visit this exhibition. I'm sorry, this is a little bit advertisement.
I think that's another thing that I found more and more is so many of these Meiji techniques and and styles, they were all developed in the Edo period, and so there's a story of continuity as well as change.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. After Edo and Meiji exhibitions by JASA, do you foresee a possibility of Taisho and Showa art projects in the future?
That's a great question. So JASA was very interested in doing an exhibition of Taisho and early Showa, but they felt that fairly recently, the Deco Japan and Taisho Chic exhibitions have covered that period. However, there are even more really exciting private collections being formed of Taisho and early Showa art, as well as exciting scholarship like Jennifer Weisenfeld's new book, kind of Gas Mask Nation, that shows that even in time of imperialism, people were still very creative with kind of the ways that they could be in terms of culture and personal expression. So I think definitely I would love to encourage another exhibition about Taisho and early Showa.
Great. Another question is, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I hope that we can see the exhibition here in Japan too. Is that a possibility?
That would be so amazing. If you have any leads, please contact me.
That leads to, what do you think were the factors in Japanese art that attracted Western people around that time of the Meiji era?
Definitely technique was a big one, and just two things, right? We learn about the kind of the excitement of encountering new modes of depiction that are different, like in Japanese prints, right? The Impressionists were excited about them because they did things so differently, right? The colors, the composition, so differently than Western art and design, and so and another big factor was the technique. So here you can see a hawk similar to the 12 Hawks by Suzuki Chokichi in Japan. This hawk on a lacquered stand is so realistic. When you look at it, you feel like the hawk is, staring at you. And so people were really amazed by that all this was done by metal casting and patination, or this gigantic, quite flawless kouransha blue and white vase of a phoenix kind of going over an image of the Byodoin. It was like very, very exciting for people, because Western art was considered to prioritize painting and sculpture as fine art and disparage the other crafts as decorative arts. So in Japan, they found a lot of support for people who wanted to reimagine possibilities for decorative arts.
Now that the show is in Chicago, and Chicago historically, after the World Expo, et cetera, Frank Lloyd Wright, et cetera, you have a lot of people who understand Japanese art. How is the reception? How do you think the reception is going to be in Houston? How is the reception currently in Chicago? And how was the reception in New York?
Oh, I think, the reception has been really good. And some people told me that in New York, they went to go see it more than once. They brought other people because they wanted to go back. And so I think each of these objects really is fascinating on its own. And I think that is what makes the exhibition so accessible to people, whether they know a lot about Japanese art or not. Is there's just the experience of kind of being together with so many great works of art. And so in Japan, in Chicago, yes, there's a small but a very vibrant group of supporters of Japanese art and culture. And we want to carry that on to the next generation. And in Houston, they are planning many special events, such as a collaboration with the Houston Ballet. And so I think this exhibition is going to bring, a broader audience into Japanese art. And also that the message is very positive. It's kind of about kind of this late 19th century Japan as joining a kind of global modern world and the interconnectedness of it.
Well, one last question that we have from online is, compared, this is basically with amongst collectors in the U.S. And the question is, do collectors in the U.S. gravitate towards post-war Japanese art more these days, like Kusama or contemporary works, and comparing to that of the current exhibition that you're showing? How do you see that?
That's a great idea, a great question. To speak frankly, in the Meiji period, another thing that attracted a lot of collectors was value. So we encountered the Goncourts in Paris. They said that I acquired an incredible, like a little okimono of a hair. It looks like it could be made from ancient Rome, but if it was ancient Roman, it would have cost 10 times what I paid for it, right? And you also see Mr. Freer in Washington, D.C., haggling with dealers to get the lowest price. And at that time, the economies of Japan and the U.S. and Europe were not anywhere near even. So it was kind of really economically advantageous for Westerners to collect Japanese art. And today, the contemporary art market is so huge, and it just has many more zeros added to the end of all the prices of the object compared to the earlier objects. And so I don't know if we can say that there is a comparatively more interest, but it's just that the dollar figures of post-war, and now because contemporary art is trying to globalize its backstory, kind of, so creating an understanding of 20th century art that's more global. And so the demand for South American artists and Latin American artists, Asian artists who were conscious of kind of global art are becoming, very, very hot on the market. So I think within that, we want to prevent money from driving, the all of the decisions. And, especially museums are nonprofit spaces where we can highlight, some works of art that, are, complementing, but not repeating things that we see in the gallery world. So.
Thank you, Chelsea. And if there's no more questions, I'd like to close with one online participant, Alice Gordon-Kerr, who's been a long-term time contributor to Japan Times, saying, "Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. No question, just gratitude."
Oh.
So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.